Hey, good morning, you beautiful people. Oh man, it's hot this morning. It is hot in this place of mine. I've got the fan blowing on me over here. But anyway, I hope you're doing well. I hope you slept well. I hope you woke up with, man, new freshness and greatness in your life, listening some beautiful little coffee kisses. So, come on. Come on. So we touched on David a little bit yesterday. And I'm thinking this morning, while we're on it, and not just while I'm thinking, I happened to read a little bit about him this morning. I thought, you know what? God showed me actually something cool to share. But now, let's start with remember King Saul, right? The same King Saul that God handpicked to be king. The same King Saul that when Samuel was going through the sons and the brothers of Saul, that he was found hiding among the weaponry or the arsenal and stuff there to dig him out there. And he wasn't the smallest bloke in the world either. The same Saul that when he disobeyed God and the Spirit of God left him, he became so ruthlessly jealous and angry toward David that he tried to kill him, that he hunted him down for years. That's all, right? Remember him. Cool, great. Now that we're on the same page, it's truly phenomenal for me that even though that ended up like that, there was this relationship that formed between Saul's son and David that was on other levels. I can't think of another place in the Bible where this level of relationship between two people actually, or I don't know, emphasized this much or described in this fashion at this moment. But yeah, there's the way. Let's see it. It's here in 1 Samuel 18. It says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he had on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So their souls was knit together. I can't say I know what that's like at this stage of my life. I don't know if I've ever had that form of relationship with somebody, but the love that they had, it gets described over and over in the Bible. You come across it quite often, I feel. But as bad as a dude as David sometimes was, the things that he did, if you think of Bathsheba, if you think of all the wars and stuff, I mean, all the war, the everything that he did, David messed up often, but the characteristics of David always stands out for me head and shoulders above the rest. He was a man with a heart after God, and a man of, coincidentally, even with all the stuff that he had going on that he was doing, that God said, he is a man after my own heart, a man who will do as I command him. Can you imagine that? So he wouldn't lift a finger against Saul while he was king, because he was God's anointed one. It was authority placed above him by the Lord. And David wouldn't. That even then, when David and his men were hiding in that cave, and Saul came in to relieve himself, and David cut off a piece of his cloak, that David felt bad afterwards and repented, because he said he lifted his hand against the anointed king of the Lord. And it's other levels when you do this sort of thing. But David promised Jonathan that he would take care of his family. The relationship and the covenant that formed between these two is something that one really can dive into, I feel. That's not where I'm going yet today. But check what David does here in 2 Samuel chapter 9. Just the odd verses, but really worth a read. Verse 1 says, and then David said, is there anyone left in the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And David called his servant Ziba. Now Ziba and his family served Saul. And he asked him, it was pointed out that Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, who had crippled feet, and David had him brought to his house, gave all Saul, and then gave all Saul's original land to them. So he's like, hey, well, this kid is still alive. And David was like, yeah, well, let's bring him here. Verse 7, David said to him, do not fear. There's now when he brought Mephibosheth there, he actually thought he was going to be killed by the king. He was very humble, very groveling. He came on there, sort of thing. But then David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. And then, just in verse 9, then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, all that belongs to Saul and all his house I have given to your master's grandson. So David brought him to his house, said, you'll always stay at my house, for the fact that he was crippled up, I assume, but also because of, as he said, for Jonathan's sake, for your father's sake. I made a promise to your father that I'd look after his family. So you will stay here. There's all your father's original lands back. Ziba, you and your people, you did serve the king. You go work the man's lands, and he will stay here. He will eat here at my table. The Bible actually says that he ate at the table and he stayed at David's house, that like he was family, which was actually quite cool for me in that one, because of the relationship he had with Jonathan. So the thing that stands out for me today is the thing of honor and integrity and loyalty. I mean, there was nobody left to make David do this. There was nobody to hold him accountable for promises made. There was nobody to tell him, even Ziba, but Ziba was still just a servant. So you can't say anything to the king, mate, bro. He'll, back in the day, sort of thing, just. And, but David, however, he was, I don't know, it's like he was stuck under the instruction of the Lord. David had such a heart for God that when he messed up, he ran straight back to God, even if it was planned messing up. I mean, Bathsheba wasn't a thing that just quickly happened overnight. There was a planned thing. If you look at the time frame of things that had to happen before and after she bathed, and that whole caboodles over there, and those things that he did. I mean, even the plan to have her husband killed in war and all that. David planned all these things. So it wasn't stuff that just kind of fell into his lap. And yet he had a heart after God. He ran straight back to God. He knew. And so I'm not trying to point out that you should look after other people's sons and grandsons, unless this is something God called you to do, of course. I'm not saying that you need to be jealous of a certain level of relationship that formed here in the Bible. No. May God give us the opportunity to have this sort of relationship with somebody in our lives. It would be truly fantastic, I think. But he looked after his friend's son, but look at the level of service he gave him. He just, oh man, he did good. So my point is to do good today. Excuse me. To be accountable and responsible children of the Lord. To be someone who is honest, somebody who operates with honor and integrity, who loves God before you love anything or anyone else. And if God places something on your heart, to do it. To go above the expectations set by men, but to always operate within God's hand. Do exactly what God tells you to do. If God tells you to give this guy all his grandfather's land back, you give it to him. If he tells you to keep that man in your house and let him eat there by you and stay there by you and live there by you, then that's exactly what you need to do. And when God calls you to do these things, you do it with all of your might. Everything you have. If you can learn to put your heart into soul in every activity that you do. Colossians 3:23. Put your heart and your soul into every activity that you do, as if you are doing it for the Lord and not for mere men. So just operate, if we can learn to operate on that level. There's no hard point I actually feel this morning. It's just these things that God is stirring up in me. It's like, just get some integrity. The main thing is, there's a lot of people have asked what is integrity, and they don't seem to really understand. And this is how I understand integrity, and I'll leave you with this morning, is if nobody else sees you, if you're alone, where you think you're alone, who are you when you are there? Who are you when you're alone? What do you do or don't do when you think nobody else is watching?